Hi. A while back we had a look at this Think Diag-II diagnostic tool for diagnosing faults with your car. And this is a really excellent device. I've been carrying it around with me for a couple of months now, and it's proved invaluable with looking at various people's cars that have had some problems. But this is a very high functionality unit. It allows you to look at live data from any module in the car, not just the ECM. And it also allows you to do various service procedures like bleeding the ABS module and doing a DPF regeneration, those kind of things. So it's a very high functionality tool, but as such, it's probably too much of a tool for the general DIYer who just wants to know why their engine light has illuminated. So today we're going to be looking at the Kingbolen YA100, which is significantly lower in cost. I think this is going for around £25 or so from Amazon. But this is a much more simple unit designed for reading codes from the ECM. So this is targeted only at reading engine codes. It's not going to help you if you've got a problem with the transmission, for example, or with the alarm or body control module. But this one allows you to read codes, erase the codes, also look at freeze frame data. So if it does log an engine code that's permanent, it will tell you the conditions in which that occurred. And then we can look at some limited live data. So we can look at the live data that would be provided by the general OBD diagnostics rather than the manufacturer specific diagnostics. So what we'll do is we'll connect it up to the OBD port and have a look at what the unit actually allows you to do. And then later on, we'll take this apart if we can and have a look at what's inside this unit. So I've just connected it up and started the engine. You don't actually need the engine running, you just need the ignition on. But you can see we've got a colour TFT which displays all of the information, and we've just got a simple up, down, back and OK. So if we go through to Diagnostic, it will detect the protocol being used, and then we have all of the diagnostic information. So currently the engine light is off, so it says off there, no DTCs. It tells you about the readiness monitors, basically the emissions, tells you what type of ignition it is. In this case I'm driving a diesel, so it's compression. So that's the basic information, and then we can go through to the diagnostic menu and we can read any codes if they exist. It tells you whether we've got any stored, pending or permanent codes. Currently there's no codes, so no problem here. You can go through and erase codes. If you had an engine code, you simply just press OK on that and it will clear it for you. Obviously if the fault is still present, then you would need to correct that fault first of all. Then we can go through to live data. And this basically goes through all of the live data that's available to it in the generic OBD interface. So 0 DTCs, obviously the engine light off, but you can see the load percentage, 31%, just sitting here idling. The coolant temperature, map pressure, engine speed, the air temperature, mass airflow, all of these kind of things. So you can go through and do a quick diagnostic and see if any of these numbers look wrong. So we've got a fuel rail pressure there, barometer, the exhaust temperature, the voltage rails. We can just go through all of those. We can also look at freeze frame data. So if there was an engine code, then you would be able to look at the conditions in which that engine code had occurred. And that's about it really. If you had a O2 sensor, we don't have one on this diesel, or in fact we do, but it doesn't work the same way as for a petrol car. We'd be able to look at whether that O2 sensor is working properly. So next in the menu, we've got the DTC lookup. Now if you had an engine code and it gave you what the code actually was, you can then go in here and try and decipher what that means. So you could go to the vehicle that you've got, put in the trouble code using the up and down buttons, and then it will tell you in text what that actually means. Now P0000 isn't a valid code, so it just says SAE reserved. Then if we go back to the main menu, we've got voltage test, and this is just a quick test to see if it looks like the alternator is doing its job. So if we go in here, this is the voltage on the OBD port, 14.8 volts. Now a battery on its own would never sit at that voltage, so clearly the alternator is trying to charge it. If it was down at 11 volts or something, then we would know obviously that we've got a problem with the battery or with the alternator. Then we've just got a couple of options like languages, units, data logging and self-test of the diagnostic tool itself, and then just a bit about the actual unit. So that's about it. A very simple tool that just allows some simple diagnostics of your car without all of the extra functionality if that's not what you need. So it's priced in such a way that you could probably buy one of these and keep it in your glove box. And then if the engine light happened to come on a journey, you could quickly plug it in and see whether it's safe to continue with your journey. Alternatively, if you've got something like a random misfire and it just triggered the engine code and then deactivated one of the cylinders, you could erase the codes and probably continue with your journey until you got to your destination and sort it properly, rather than trying to run only on 3 or 5 cylinders or something like that. So now let's take a look inside the unit, and Launch, ThinkCar and Kingbolen are all part of the same group, so it'd be interesting to see if it shares any components with the ThinkCar 2 that we looked at last time. So it's simply got 4 screws at the back there, so I'll just undo those. Okay. Right, so that came apart nice and easy. We've got the PCB here. Let's take a closer look. So here we have a close-up of the unit, and we can see the green PCB here. And if you want to get your own PCBs made, then why not visit our sponsor for this video, JLCPCB. If you ever want to get your PCBs assembled at JLCPCB, they now offer the ability to order parts from DigiKey and Mouser and have those assembled onto your PCB. And also, they've more recently added 3D printing onto their website, so you can get your parts 3D printed in various different materials for a very reasonable price. So don't forget to visit JLCPCB if you're thinking of getting some items made. So at the bottom of the unit we've got a mini USB connector, and this is for firmware updates. So when there is an update available, you can go on the Kingbolen website, download the updates, and you will allow it to update any of the tools. We've got a couple of passives from the data lines that then obviously go off to the IC up here. We've got a couple of diodes here as well, so this allows the unit to be powered either from the USB port or the OBD port, because if you do want to do a firmware update, you don't want to have it plugged into the car to power it, so this allows you to power it from both. We've got a 3.3 volt regulator just here, surrounded by the ceramic capacitors, and then the main IC on here is this YA100 IC, and I hadn't heard of this brand before, but it looks like it's just been marked either an MCU or a custom device. And so if you actually search that part, you end up on this website here, which is a brand of professional tools. So obviously this looks like it's aimed at the Chinese market, but they're probably all being produced. These look fairly similar in design. They're just being rebranded for different markets. Then back on the PCB, we've got some memory here, and this almost certainly has all of the DTCs stored on here with the description of what they actually mean for every language. If you did a firmware update, it likely only update the firmware on here, but this has all of the data that's being displayed on the LCD effectively. We've got a CAN transceiver, and that goes off to 2 of the pins up here. We've got a 78LO5 voltage regulator for dropping down the up to 15 volts, down to 5 volts, and then presumably down to 3.3 after that. Obviously we've got some reverse polarity protection and some capacitors again surrounding that voltage regulator, and then we've got a whole array of transistors here and diodes. So I'm not 100% sure what this is doing, because given that the CAN transceiver connects to dedicated pins on the OBD port, we don't need to read from other modules, so that is a standardized connection. Obviously we were reading the supply voltage into here to allow us to read what the voltage actually is, but there's a whole bunch of other transistors on here which I'm not 100% sure what they would be doing on the diagnostic port. And then at the very top we've got the TFT, and then we've got this random bit of FR4 board which doesn't actually go anywhere. It's got just copper on one side and it just sits in there, so I'm not really sure what that is doing. So yeah, that's the inside of the unit. And so looking at that flash chip, there are quite a few repeating entries and that kind of thing, but I don't see any plain text in here really, so either it's a binary file that has already been compiled, or there is some other file system going on. So that's the Kingbolen YA100, a nice straightforward code reader that allows you to do some very basic diagnostics on your vehicle. I'll put links to this in the description down below if you want to take a look at this. I hope you enjoyed the video. Any thoughts and comments, leave them in the comment section down below. And until next time, thanks for watching.